everyone and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be doing a review and demo of the Kurecolor Cartoonist markers from Kuretake ZIG. These are a double-ended alcohol-based marker and I'm going to be looking at the brand new Manga Starter Set today. This set comes with 11 colours and a fine liner, and I was very interested to see how they compared to the other alcohol marker brands that I normally use. So I want to very quickly say a big thank you to ZIG for sending me the set to test out and for making this video possible. And as always with my reviews, even though I sometimes do get sent things to test out, my thoughts are 100% honest and my own. So with that out of the way, let's talk about these markers. Some of you may be familiar with the company who makes these. They also make the Gansai Tambi watercolour paints and the ZIG Real brush pens, along with lots of other art supplies. They're a very established company. I've been using their products for years and I've always been really happy with the quality, and these markers did not disappoint. They are really lovely. I really loved using these markers and they were really nice to work with. So the set that I have here, as I mentioned earlier, is the new Manga Starter Set. It was developed by the ZIG UK branch and is aimed as an introduction to alcohol-based markers, and I believe that the colours were picked out by local manga artists. So the markers are double-ended. They have a brush nib on one end and a fine tip on the other. The coloured cap on the end of the marker is on the end that has the fine tip. So when you're grabbing your markers, it's easy to remember which end to open. The black cap is on the end with the brush tip, and then the coloured cap is on the end with the fine tip. The colours that come in this set include a warm and a cool grey, several varying earth tones that could also be used as skin tones, then two greens, a yellow, a blue and a red. And it also has a fine liner that has a 0.1 nib, so it's perfect to refine delicate lines. And then the set also comes with a PDF printable instruction book. I downloaded the book easily onto my phone, and it has step-by-step instructions on drawing manga faces and some colouring and blending tips as well. It's a really nice little inclusion to this set. So the first thing that I did was to swatch out the colours, and I also did some blending tests and experimented with how many colours I could make by layering up the markers and just basically getting to know the supplies. I think if you're working with a small set like this, then layering the different colours over each other to create new tones is a really good technique to try out, especially with a limited colour selection. I found that the blendability of these markers is really good. I could get very similar results as I would with my normal Copic markers. The ink was highly pigmented, it laid down really well, and it wasn't streaky. Bearing in mind that I did have a limited number of colours to work from, I found that they were blending easily together. I also wanted to show a quick comparison of the size difference between the Kurecolor markers and the Copic sketch and the Winsor & Newton brush markers. The Kurecolor are longer and thinner than the Copic sketch and the Winsor & Newton brush markers. They're a little bit more similar in size to the Copic Chow, but longer. And I also compared the brush nibs. Now with alcohol-based markers, it's the brush nib that normally makes a marker more expensive. So on the whole, markers that have high quality brush nibs are much more expensive than markers that have a bullet nib, for example. And if you're going to be doing a lot of blending and you want to get nice smooth blends, non-streaky colouring, then having a high quality brush nib is important, and it makes quite a big difference to the colouring, at least from my experience. So the brush nib on these Kurecolor markers, they're a little bit smaller than the Copic sketch and the Winsor & Newton brush marker, but they're really nice. They're firm but also flexible, and for me that's the perfect combination. I need a firm nib, but it also needs to be flexible so I can do the blending. And to be honest, I liked these brush tips a lot more than I liked the Winsor & Newton brush tips on those markers. And I felt like these brush nibs had a very similar feel to the Copic. They were just a bit smaller, and actually having them smaller can be an advantage. The Copic brush nib is great for doing larger colouring, but if you're doing like adult colouring books where you have very detailed illustrations or you draw very detailed illustrations, sometimes the Copic nib is a little bit too big, but because this nib is a bit smaller and the fine tip nib, I just think these markers are particularly useful for doing very fine and detailed colouring because the nibs are a bit smaller. So now I'm going to be putting these markers into action and create a small drawing using the colours in this set, and I'm going to talk a bit more about how the markers work together and how I felt about using them. So to get started, I have a piece of Bristol board here and I've taped it down to an old piece of cardstock and I'm sketching in my drawing. I decided to go composition wise for a girl's face, some flowers and a background colour so that I could use this set to its advantage and use all the different colours and make good use of the skin tones because I really wanted to see how they blended together. Now, the fine liner was really nice. I felt like it didn't glide across the paper as smoothly as some of the other multi-liners I have, but apart from that, it's a good black ink fine liner. So now let's talk about the colours. Now, there are 135 colours available in this range. This set and the PDF book that comes with it are brand new products, but the colours inside are not. They are all available open stock. So if you liked the look of these markers, you wanted to test them out, but you don't like the colours that come in the set, you could always go ahead and pick out your own selection. Now for me, it's really important that art supplies come open stock. I feel like if I'm going to invest my money into a set of pencils or markers or paints, I always feel like I want to be able to have the ability to replace a colour if necessary, to be able to get a new colour open stock without having to buy the whole set again. So obviously it's going to be personal preference, but because I use up products like markers and pencils quite quickly, to me it's important that things do come open stock, and I like the fact that these do. They are, however, not refillable. Now, Zig do make another marker line, the Kurecolor twin markers, and those are refillable. They are a grey coloured marker with a bullet nib and a chisel nib. So if you're interested in the refillable markers, you could have a look at those. I personally use markers so much that having them refillable is actually very important because I get through the colours so quickly, and just from a price standpoint, it's much more economical in the long term to have refillable markers if you use them a lot, and it's also much better from a recycling point of view that you're refilling the same marker rather than buying new ones all the time. So for me and the way that I work and the amount of ink that I use, it's essential that markers are refillable. But that said, if you're just starting or you want to try out some markers and you're not going to use them all the time, or you're just not going to get heavy duty use out of your markers, then I don't think it's so important for the markers to be refillable. It all depends on your personal circumstances and how much you're going to use a marker. As for the colour selection here, colours are a very personal preference, and there are a couple of colours in this particular set that I wouldn't have picked, but I don't draw manga, and I know that the colours in this set were picked by manga artists, so maybe that these particular colours are more useful if you draw manga than they are to me. But anyway, the greys in this set are very important. Now, it's sometimes easy to think grey is quite a boring colour, particularly when most marker lines come in loads of beautiful, bright, cheerful colours. It can sometimes feel a bit boring to have to buy the greys, and I certainly have felt like that in the past. But greys are very essential to a marker collection, and they are so useful in this particular set because you can layer the two greys under all the other, or over all the other colours, to create the shadows and to create the depth and dimension. So I used the greys for all my shadows on this piece, and I used them over or under the red, the yellow, the blue, the green, and I was able to get as much shading as I needed just using those couple of greys. So I think greys are very important to any marker collection for that reason, and I really like that they were in this set. I also liked the skin tones, the earth colours. They were a nice selection, and it's always nice to have skin tones or earth tones in a beginner set because that way you can dive straight into colouring people. If you don't like colouring people, then there are art that the Kurecolor markers do come in different sets, so you could pick one that best suits the type of art you create. But if you do colour people, then this set's nice because it does come with some skin tones that you can get started with, or earth tones that you can use as skin tones. Now, I would have liked a purple and a pink, perhaps instead of the red and the darker green. Now I like more muted colours, so the bright red and the yellow I found a bit too bold, but honestly that's not a complaint. And I'm sure there are lots of you that will love working with the bolder colours. As I said, colour selection is a personal preference, so as a set I think that the colours do work really well together. I was able to create shadow and blending just using the 11 colours that came in this pack, and even though the red is not my favourite, I can see that there is a good balance in the set between paler tones and darker tones. So at the end I felt like my illustration was very well balanced between the lighter and the darker tones. So I think the set does work really well together. Now for a price point, the Zig UK website lists these markers at about £3.50 each. And they do have other sets available as well. However, I don't know the price of this particular Manga Starter Set yet because they're brand new and I haven't seen them in any retailers, but I will put a link in the description box below when I have found one, and so that you can check them out in the future. And obviously prices do vary a lot between online and in stores, and depending on whether or not shops have sales and coupons available, so there's always a bit of a price variation. So the only other thing that I want to mention here is that the markers did smell a bit stronger than the Copics do. Now I am more sensitive to smells, and honestly after a while I didn't notice it anymore, but the alcohol smell when you first open the marker is definitely a bit stronger than the Copic. And also the caps are very firmly or very tightly on the ends of the markers, so you have to tug a little to pull them off, and you need to push firmly to put them back on again. When you put the cap back on the marker, you have to push firmly and you hear a little click when the caps go on all the way. I think that if you're starting out, buying a set is actually a really good option. Now when I first started my marker collection, I bought markers open stock and I spent ages picking the colours, and I feel like in hindsight it would have been much better to just have picked a set so that I could get started. And I think if you're starting out with markers, I would always recommend people to just get a set, because that way you don't have to worry about the colours. You can just get started, get working with the markers, get experimenting with them, and then you can easily build up your collection from that set and add colours that you need. So I would always recommend starting with a set for beginners. And I think this set is a really good option, and I think it's a perfect starter. The markers are really good quality, the brush tips are really good quality, they blend well, the ink is streak free. I was really happy with how the piece turned out and how the markers worked, so yes, I can definitely recommend them. If you're looking for an introduction to markers or you want to try this brand, I think they're really nice. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the review. That's about all I have to say for these markers. If you have any questions, make sure you leave a comment down below, and if you use these markers, make sure you let us know what your experience has been with using them. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week, everyone. I hope you found the review helpful, and I will see you all next time.